Hello and welcome to Revolutionary Gazette. I'm Andy, here on location at the West Point Museum of the United States Military Academy, West Point, New York. And I'm here with Mike Diaz, Curator of History and Uniforms here at the museum.
Thanks for coming. I'm really happy about some of the stuff that we've been able to pull out from behind the scenes for you today.
All right. Well, before we get started, I do want to say, first of all, thank you to our patrons. Your financial contributions get to do something like take a road trip to the U.S. Military Academy. Today, we're here doing Unseen History, which is our opportunity to go to a museum which has a vast collection. Not everything gets to be seen in a museum. A lot of things stay in the archives, and this is a chance for a curator to bring out an item that wouldn't get to be seen otherwise, either because it doesn't fit with a display downstairs, or maybe it's too rare, it's too fragile, and get a chance to talk about it. So, Mike, what are we talking about here?
We have a Revolutionary War era physician's chest. What we would consider maybe more internal medicine. Something that really takes some training and education during the period to use. It's going to be a kit that has both the mechanisms to prepare medicine and the medicines themselves, which is going to be kind of a dizzying array of wood barks and powders and creams and some stuff that they would try to put together to maintain the health of the men under their care.
So whose kit was this, and what do we know about him?
So the history behind this one is a little thin. We know just from some of the paper fragments that were found inside the kit that belonged to a Dr. Cartwright. I think it was entered the collector's market through his descendants, and then was collected by the museum in the early 20th century. So we don't know a whole lot about Dr. Cartwright, except that he was from Ossining, New York, which is on the other side of the Hudson. So West Point's on the west side, over on the east side, and a little bit further south is Ossining.
Closer to New York City then.
Yeah.
And then, so do we know then, is he a military doctor? Is he a civilian doctor that's just helping the army? Do we know his status at all?
We don't, unfortunately. Someone that would have, that would have a kit like this was probably someone that was practicing, before the war. There's not a rank associated with his name, so we don't know exactly how he fit into the Army's command structure.
Well, and you have to imagine if the Army's in the area, they probably would have. The Army is perpetually short of doctors. I'm sure They would have been trying to get local doctors to help out.
Everywhere the Army goes is going to be the fourth largest city in America at the time. So certainly if you're a physician that's in practice, a whole bunch of new clients just set up, hopefully not directly in your backyard, but certainly somewhere nearby.
It's fascinating you say that. I think sometimes we forget just how small cities were in the United States at the time, and relatively how large the Continental Army could be moving around.
And remember that when we talk about the Continental Army being at West Point, we don't just mean just this one cliff sticking onto the Hudson, that the Army spent more time in the Hudson Valley than it did anywhere else in the country during the Revolution. So there's a number of Army campsites spread out through the hills here, because of course these campsites are consumptive. They're chopping down trees, they're annoying the locals, so they do have to keep moving around.
And I think, when it comes to the American Revolution and winter quarters and things, people tend to think about either Valley Forge, which of course they were only in Pennsylvania the 1 year, or Morristown, which the Army did a few winters there. Right. Towards the end of the war, the Newburgh Conspiracy, I know we were talking about this earlier, that cantonment's only a few miles north of here, correct?
The New Windsor Cantonment, which is where the Army spends the last winter of the war, is just 10 miles north and west of here, just over the big mountain that kind of cuts us off from everything else.
Well, to set the scene a little bit more before we get into this, we talk about West Point in the American Revolution. It's this choke point in the river. So why exactly are the forces gathering here? Why is Washington choosing to make this such a focus for his army?
Thinking in logistics, thinking supply lines, Boston stays open for most of the war. So that's a big entry point for supplies coming in from France and from other points overseas. The Army spends most of its time south and west of the Hudson. So controlling access to the Hudson River keeps the Army fed, keeps reinforcements coming down from New England to the Army in the field. So controlling the Hudson is a central war aim for both sides.
And for Washington's army, staying here and keeping this location keeps the English blocked up in New York Harbor, right? Keeps them on Manhattan and the area around.
Right. These mountains are dense and hard to get into. There's plenty of places to defend.
Well, in front of us, we got this medical kit. So what are we looking at here?
Sure. So medicine in the American Revolution is one of my kind of pet interests. The first museum job I worked at, we actually had a replica of this kit, of this box.
Oh, really?
Stuffed with some of the things that were inside. And so it's an interesting time that you have some learned physicians, guys that receive either some degree of formal education or apprenticeship, And they've got a mix of things that are have some practical effect that actually do work, and other things that, don't. Or they might treat a symptom that is not certainly treating the root cause of the disease, or, making things worse in the long run.
We're seeing that transition from having the country doctor or the self-taught doctor to having the university doctor, or someone who's apprenticed with the university. Right? We're getting towards more formalized medicine, but it's still kind of a hodgepodge of the two in the era.
Right. And we don't know kind of where on the spectrum this Dr. Cartwright fell. But
Okay.
if he's Dr. Cartwright, that speaks to some degree of
Skill and
skill and education.
Now, would a medical kit like this been something he made for himself? Would it have been something you could have purchased? Do we have any idea of how he would have acquired something like that?
I don't know if the Army would have issued kits like this as a set.
Yeah.
But certainly looking at the contents inside, it looks like things that he was able to cobble together from different vendors or different sources.
Well, what are some of the things that are inside here?
Sure. So they go from the very practical, set of scales. You need to make precise measurements of the various powders and tinctures put together. Mortar and pestle is very good for powdering barks or some of the various compounds that they could use.
Because they're making some of their own medicines, right?
Certainly. And they're starting from, again, we have some Peruvian bark here. We'll come to that in a second. But, it'll start like this, grind it up in a mortar and pestle, and either roll it up in like a gum arabic to make a pill that can be swallowed, or that's something that can be boiled in water to make a tea.
Okay.
And taken that way.
It's interesting talking about grounding that stuff up, though, because, in some ways, not only is he having to be a physician, but he's having to be a pharmacist at the same time.
Certainly. And it kind of blurs that line a little bit between, folk medicine and, so much of medicine today is very packaged, very branded, and this is stuff that is really still being made by hand by the...
and we have examples of both of those kind of in front of us,
yeah,
right?
Certainly.
So what kind of medicines do we see here?
Sure. So I think starting with one that did work, this Peruvian bark from the cinchona tree, which contains quinine, which is, to this day, what we use to treat malaria, right? It gets into
I've
the
been on
British
anti-malarial drugs,
Yes.
and I also enjoy gin and tonic.
There
right?
you go. So, and which is the British Army in India's anti-malaria malaria drug. That's how it kind of enters their cuisine. Think of the logistics trail to get this up to North America.
I was going to say, that would be an expensive medicine to get from South America up here, too.
And it comes in handy that Spain is allied with the United States during the war, that we do have access to this,
their trading network,
circuitous as it might be. Then we have, some of the other things in here are patent medicines. This is to be given for the bite of a mad dog. There's some others. This is another kind of bark that this is packaged up that is said to be helpful for a number of cold and influenzas and the long list of diseases that this treats. Not terribly sure what that's made out of. Not sure if that works. There are some other barks with medicinal properties. I don't know. That certainly doesn't mean if you grind up every tree bark you get your hands on that it's going to do something.
Sure. There's a big difference between willow bark making your aspirin and elm bark here, what it's going to do, right?
Right, exactly.
So we see a wide variety of efficacy with the drugs that are in here.
Right. And then there's some things that are a little bit mysterious to us. Now, this bottle here, this might be calamine. So anyone that's had poison ivy or,
sure, yeah.
Would be familiar, but we're not entirely sure. We might actually work with the chemistry department here at West Point. There's a cadet that might be interested in doing this as their senior project of kind of taking some samples from this, running through a spectrometer or some of the equipment that they have and figuring out what this is.
Well, it's excellent to think about these future Army officers today using all these modern technology to investigate the past of the Army itself and Army medicine and all that.
And it's something that we benefit from, being attached to a major research university.
And talks to the relationship you guys have with the cadets here.
Sure.
Right? You're not just a museum for West Point, you are instructional for the cadets, and there's a relationship, right?
Absolutely. We're pretty frequently in the classroom with cadets, giving them hands-on experience, letting them get up close and personal to the real stuff of history, stuff that was frequently used or collected by their predecessors for their education.
Well, for the rest of the kit, are there surgical tools or things like that inside as well then?
So surgery would be kind of a different field. So this would just be worried about maintaining the body's health as opposed to...
He's a physician, not a surgeon.
Right.
Okay. And that's a distinction I think was larger at the period than we see it today in a lot of ways.
Right. A surgeon is almost it's almost a blue collar, white collar divide, right? A surgeon's
he's a white collar doctor,
right?
Not a
surgeon's a meat cutter,
yeah.
Right?
Okay.
And famously, doubles for the barber half the time, and
sure,
all of that. So this takes some more training and skill to use, and it is a discrete set of tools from what surgery and kind of working on the mechanics of the body.
So, Mike, what's in this canister over here?
Sure. So this is aloe, which is probably going to see most of its use during the period as a burn cream. Now, think of that the soldiers are firing off their muskets a few times a day as part of drill. Big gouts of flaming black powder shooting out the
especially from a flintlock. Yeah,
shooting out the side of a flintlock. Soldiers are responsible for cooking their own food and building their own campfire. So there's a lot of time around open flame. Burns, minor and major, are going to be a fact of life for a lot of these guys.
I mean, and something we still use today.
Yeah, absolutely. They're very good at observing, what works. That everything here, I'm sure, will have some kind of effect on the body. Might not always be the effect that they want. Might not always be what they want it to be. But things that they can make that kind of mechanical connection. They
might not know why it works, but they understand it works.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's a fair degree of trial and error with medicine through the period and up to this point, right?
Right, absolutely. Yeah. When we talk medicine in the American Revolution, we think of the smallpox inoculation, which was going on here in the Hudson Valley. That was an ongoing Army program.
And relatively innovative for medicine at the time,
hugely so,
too.
Yeah. That was the first, government-directed inoculation program. It's easy to think of the kind of the dramatics and the big highs and lows like that. But guys get dry, guys get itchy. So a little bit of aloe cream or calamine lotion.
No, it's great that you
way.
say that. In my experience, both with the real military and reenacting, putting on, if you got boots on and you're marching all day, or you have something that's rubbing wrong or something, it's amazing the difference it makes in how you're feeling about your day just to be able to treat something like a small sore, a cut, something that's uncomfortable, especially if you're a soldier living on your feet. It's amazing how something like that can have such a big difference.
Yeah, I think it speaks to, again, some of those fine details of the soldier's life that it's often, they're probably not even going to bother to write them down sometimes. So there's not a lot of other ways into that kind of detail other than a close reading of the material culture.
Well, Mike, do you mind if we get inside the case and get a chance to open up and see what's inside?
So, what you'll see, as with the pieces on the table, a lot of this has been kind of wrapped up in plastic or encased some way. That's for the protection of the artifacts. It's also for our protection. Not all this stuff is great for you. And there's, a couple of stories, again, in the lore of the staff of people opening this and then getting like a weird cold the next couple of days. So
interesting.
I think we're okay. But certainly, that's having things that we want to retain the nature of how stuff was in the box originally, but packaged up as safely as we can.
Well, and that's, interesting off screen. We were talking about curation techniques and, this way of making sure, it's the collection is still together. It's still in the box, but it's still obviously preserved in bags or other packaging. You always worry, I would imagine, about something like if you were to split up this grouping to make sure it's preserved in shelving or something like that, that it would start to disappear or start to get damaged.
Absolutely.
So it's great to see it combined and all together.
And using the original function of it, right? This is all meant to pack away. Everything's got a little discreet cubby hole in there. So relying on the the ingenuity of whoever put this together, 250 years ago.
All right. Well, thank you so much for letting us see this, letting us get this out of your archives and out here to share with everyone.
Like I said, one of my interests. It's a little unsung corner that I'm happy to bring out into the light as often as I can.
For Revolutionary Gazette, I'm Andy, here at West Point Museum in West Point, New York. If you ever get a chance, it's an excellent place to come out and visit. I really encourage you. I will say, check their Facebook page for their hours. Sometimes they vary. As Mike said, their primary job isn't the public. That is definitely something they love, but they're here to support the Corps Cadets. So sometimes they're not always open on their published hours. But if you're in the area, come visit, and maybe you'll get to see something that you wouldn't see otherwise. The collection here is fantastic. For Revolutionary Gazette, I'm Andy, and we'll catch you next time.